Good evening and welcome, and thanks for being here. We gather tonight at a moment that many of us find disorienting, a time when values we may have thought were becoming more firmly established as a result of decades of collective struggle are suddenly being contested, rolled back, or openly attacked. We planned this event early this year. We were already worried about what we had found in our research and were seeing unfold on the world stage. In the meantime, however, things have been rapidly getting worse. Internationally, the United States is sliding into authoritarianism with developments that echo Nazi Germany in the 30s. Immigrants and even US citizens are being disappeared for barely looking different. Universities and academics are branded as enemies of the state. Bans have been introduced on a specific terminology in public institutions. They do not just involve expressions like diversity, equity, and inclusion, or climate change, and terms such as queer or racism, but also much more ordinary terms like gender, trauma, pollution, indigenous or racism, or disability or woman. There are efforts to establish Christianity as a de facto state religion. We are witnessing the rise of organized anti-gender movements, resulting in the dismantling of reproductive rights and regressive actions against LGBTQI+ and transgender people. Trump has announced plans to resume nuclear testing and open previously protected lands to oil and gas drilling. Israel continues its genocide of the Palestinian people with impunity. However, when concerned citizens take action in solidarity, like those who joined the Freedom Flotilla, they are criminalized by their own governments. Here in Norway, the usual mantra is that we are a peace-loving and rational nation, advocates of international solidarity, sexual liberation, gender equality, and environmental awareness. And that racism is not so serious here, and that far-right extremism exists only on the fringe. Yet, the reality is more troubling. Far-right positions are no longer confined to the margins, as the recent elections confirmed. They increasingly set the terms of mainstream debate and lived reality. Last August, Ethiopian-born Tamima Nibras Johar, 34, was brutally killed while she was at work by a right-wing extremist. The murder is the latest of a long series of severe far-right and racist attacks in Norway in recent years. Since 2010, there have been at least 21 such episodes of violence. We have witnessed that the tradwife movement idealizes subordinate roles for women and their domestic confinement. Anarcho through the broadcast of the whole Charlie Kirk memorial service, sent live for over 3 hours the unfiltered views of the Trump administration. Norway continues to invest our oil fund in Israeli companies implicated in occupation and human rights violations. We have seen the differential treatment of public figures. Amrit Kaur, then leader of Rødt Ungdom, was forced to resign for her social media reaction following the killing of Charlie Kirk. While Ingrid Olina Hovland, leader of the Kristelig Folkeparti's Ungdom, faced no consequences for stating that rape victims should carry pregnancies to term. Conservative Party politician Simen Sandelian made transphobic statements after Kirk's murder, suggesting without evidence that the killer was a transgender person. He left the party, yet retained his elected seat. What we are witnessing is an emboldening, a spreading, and normalization of Trumpism, anti-immigration policies and racism, a backlash against women's rights, homo and transphobia, and anti-environmentalism. In short, a backlash against hard-won minority rights. In other words, we cannot take for granted that we are safe in Norway. This is why this event brings together researchers and activists to discuss what this means for research, practice, and daily life. Are inclusion and diversity under threat in Norway? In what ways? How can we protect our freedoms, communities, and well-being? What is at stake in resisting? How do we show and practice solidarity with one another at a time of increasing anti-intellectualism, hatred, and exclusion? There will be 5 of us today to discuss these questions. Kristina Arketi is professor in political communication and journalism at the University of Oslo. She has been researching and publishing on the role of media and communication in political processes for over 20 years. Her research illuminates the black spots of journalism, particularly why and how the voices of minorities get muzzled, and the consequences of this silencing. She is also interested in trauma, especially in how the media might contribute to greater political polarization by amplifying individual and collective wounds. Jonas Kittelsen has organized over 50 disruptive actions against the fossil fuel industry and those who enable it. Kittelsen recently won against the Norwegian state in the Supreme Court while he finished his master thesis from the Center of Development and Environment at UiO. He's currently writing his first book about the deep structural changes needed to combat the ecological crisis and strategies for building people power and activism moving forward. Luca Dahlen Espset is a trans activist currently working in PKI, the Norwegian Patient Organization for Gender Incongruence. He is also the author of the book Født i rett kropp, Born in the Right Body, and he has a bachelor's degree in biology and a master's degree in gender studies. His master thesis focuses on how the public discourse influences how trans people can live and organize. Luca is also the host of the Norwegian podcast Trans-Norge. I myself, my name is Banafshe Ranji. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in sociology at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, Trondheim. I've been teaching and researching media and communication studies, as well as migration studies, social inequality, and critical race studies. We will also have time at the end for questions and answers. But before we get started, we will have a short reflection practice guided by Christina.
Tonight, we're going to talk about topics that many of us feel strongly about. And that is why I would like to invite you to a 5 minutes guided reflection to facilitate grounding and listening with compassion. So I would like to invite you, you're free to do it or not, to sit straight in your chair in a comfortable position, maybe with your feet on the ground or however you find yourself comfortable. And I would like to invite you to close your eyes or maybe just soften your gaze and let go of any tension from the day. Focus on your breathing, witnessing yourself inhaling and exhaling. Now, call to mind a person you love. See this person in your mind and silently speak their name. Feel the love you have for them, like a current of light coming from your heart, shining and reaching out to them. Let yourself experience how much you want this person to be free from fear, from being exposed to greed or violence or hatred. How much you want them to be free from anxiety, from any cause of suffering. Continue feeling the warm flow of light in your heart. See in your mind's eye those with whom you share your daily life. Maybe family, friends, colleagues at work. Include also the people in this room. Let them appear around you. Direct, in turn, one by one, the loving light from your heart towards each of them. Among them, there might be someone you do not like, or might even be in conflict with. Allow yourself to shine the light from your heart also on them. Experience the desire that they are also free from fear, hatred, and suffering. Now you start seeing around you, in widening circles, more and more people. Although you do not know them, or you have not met them, you are connected to them in ways you do not know or do not fully realize. Maybe they drive the bus you take every day. They are the team of doctors and nurses who took care of your grandmother when she had cancer, or those who washed their bed sheets or cooked her meals while she was in hospital. Perhaps they are the people in faraway lands who made the clothes you are wearing, or grew the coffee beans for your coffee. shine the light from your heart also on them. Experience the desire that they also are free from fear, hatred, and suffering. Imagine the light from your heart expanding like a glowing dome that first envelops this building, then covers Oslo, then the whole of Norway, and expands across the sea to neighboring countries and extends to the whole of Europe and beyond until it has hugged the entire world. Experience in this golden light the desire that all beings, humans and non-humans, like animals and plants and mountains and lakes, are free from fear, hatred, and suffering. Imagine you're now in space, seeing our planet Earth, suspended like a marble in the blackness of the universe. Contemplate for a second the vastness of the universe. Feel the presence of its countless galaxies, stars, planetary systems. How big is the universe? How old? In all of this space, you look back at Earth, a living blue and green planet. This is our home, the source of all we know and love, the source of all we are. Experience the desire that also our planet is free from hatred, violence, and suffering. The earth is now enveloped in a soft golden glow. You are approaching it, plunging into it, bathing in its light. Drawing nearer and nearer, you are witnessing the lights that other people are shining on you from their hearts. Allow yourself to experience their desire that you are free from fear, hatred, and suffering. Let this warmth fill your heart. We are now back in Oslo at Litteraturhuset, in a room with other people who have taken our same journey and who have shared their warmth with us. You may take a couple more breaths, and when you're ready, in your own time, you can open your eyes. So we would like to invite the panelists to the stage.
Okay. We will begin by an introduction by the panelists and their work, and then we will continue with questions and a discussion. Christina, can you tell us about your work and introduce yourself? Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like you're hearing a lot from me at this stage. Okay, I'll soon stop. Yes, so I just want to say that the findings I'm going to share, they are from the study that I conducted with Banafshe, so we contributed equally to the research, so I'm also speaking on her behalf. So we have conducted a study that was funded by Mediatilsynet, where we investigated the media representations of individuals with an immigrant backgrounds in Norway during the COVID pandemic. We wanted to find out what the representations of individuals with an immigrant background was, and we also wanted to know what the reaction of these individuals was to the coverage that was representing them. And what we found was bigger than we were expecting. And our results, although we focus on the pandemic, actually go much more broadly than that. We have been now working on that project for 4 years, and if you're interested, we also have articles and publications that we can share. But I don't have much time, so I'll get to the point. So we have 3 main findings. So the first one is that the mainstream media in Norway is racist. And by racism, I mean a systematic practice of discrimination, marginalization, and inferiorization of minorities. We analyzed the news discourse during the pandemic in main national newspapers like Aftenposten, VG, and Klassekampen. And what we found were systematic and consistent features of racism. In fact, across the board, across all newspapers, and during a time frame of 15 months. At the generic level, we found that media reports tended to juxtapose a pure and healthy Norway, so everything that was Norwegian was pure and healthy, to a foreign world that was infectious and dangerous. So everything that was non-Norwegian was infectious. And particularly individuals with an immigrant background were identified consistently as the problem, mainly as a result of their culture. Culture was presented as a driving force for immigrant communities, deciding how they were thinking and how they were behaving. So this was at a general level the kind of narratives that we identified. But we also analyzed in depth the features of the language that was used in the article. And of course, we didn't find any racist slurs, so the coverage was not obviously racist. But there were features that cumulatively led to portraying this picture. So imagine like dots on a piece of paper, and over time, readers, they tend to connect these dots, often unconsciously. So there were features that sometimes might have appeared irrelevant. I'll give you an example. So maybe there is a sentence that says that almost every second person who has tested positive in Norway, positive to COVID obviously, was born abroad or was born in Norway to a foreign mother. So why a foreign mother? So it seems like an irrelevant detail, but the implication here that is confirmed also by other articles is that, again, culture and biology play a role. Also, there was a factual information and statistics that were presented as part of an objective picture. So journalists wanted to present the facts. The problem is that a lot of this information was presented without context. So in fact, the readers were expected to draw their own conclusions. For example, sentences like, among those born in Norway, X number has been infected by COVID-19. Among those born in Norway, the figure is another number. And so, obviously, with the people born abroad being more infected by COVID. And so one is supposed to draw the conclusions out of this. And it's actually possible because once you have established these narratives where the immigrant communities are the problem, then that's what you are going to, to connect this information to. So other features that we observed were, for example, missing questions. So journalists didn't ask why, for example, some immigrant communities were more affected by COVID than others. So always the implication was that because of their culture, somehow they weren't following the rules, or they weren't following the media, and so on. So maybe I'll stop there with the first finding. The second finding is based on interviews that we conducted with individuals with an immigrant background. And our result is that racism in the media has devastating consequences on the life of immigrants, of individuals with an immigrant background. So we conducted 21 interviews with a range of interviewees from different nationalities, ethnicity, profession, gender, and so on. And we focus on their sense of feeling at home. So how did they feel their connection to the society? Obviously, feeling at home is related to a sense of familiarity, comfort, security, and also emotional attachment. What we found was that all aspects of the life of the interviewees were affected, and very profoundly. For example, there were different emotional reactions to the coverage, from sadness to resignation to feeling that we are always getting the blame. So also in the pandemic, are we getting the blame for the infection? And one might feel that the sense of belonging is something, just a feeling, but it has very material consequences on the life of people, because it affects their well-being, because feeling that you are not welcome, feeling you are in danger, always creates a tension in your body, affecting your health. As one of our interviewees put it, he said, "I feel it in my body, in my soul, in my mind. It made me feel worthless. It made me feel the bad guy. It made me feel nobody." Also, this climate of suspicion affected how people took decisions, for example, whether where they would travel, where they would move, even in the town, even when traveling was allowed. It affects them economically because if you lost a job during the pandemic, it became more difficult to find a new one. And it affects also the trust in the government, because many felt they couldn't trust the government, who seemed not to be interested in protecting them. So we concluded that the media are actually an obstacle to integration, to put it very bluntly, because how can you possibly feel at home when you're constantly reminded that you don't belong? And also, racism in the media is a public health issue because it deeply affects every aspect of the life of individuals with an immigrant background. And they effectively end up not having the same rights as other citizens. So it also creates, contributes to creating a class B of citizens. I don't know whether I've been talking for long. Maybe I can leave the rest for later.
Yeah, I will ask some questions. So,
Yeah.
but maybe you have 1 more minute.
It's okay. I'll leave it here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we continue with you, Nats. Yeah, if you can tell us about what you have been involved recently. You are also writing your book, but both in terms of writing and activism. Can you tell us?
I remember when I was young, I grew up at Grönland in Oslo with very multicultural background. And I really got the world and social and global questions close to me. And I remember thinking as a teen, hearing about this climate change thing and believing that it cannot be that bad, right? Because people are acting like this is fine. There must be something I've been missing here. And then after high school, I went to China for a year, where I actually experienced extreme weather. I saw people dying of extreme weather. The first thing I did in the morning was to check the air quality. That decided whether I could train or what to eat and all these things. So when I came back and study, I really went into the climate change and saw that this is just not an issue, or this is not just a justice issue. It's existential. there is no justice without climate justice. The UN expects 5.5 billion people to experience water scarcity in 2050. 7 of 9 planetary boundaries are breached. We're not talking about expenses as if it's costly. We're talking about potential ecological and civilizational collapse. And when I actually started to take that in, and in the space of University of Oslo, I came after my bachelor's that I have to do everything in my power to confront this. And I started to see more and more that oil in Norway is the big thing. We are Europe's biggest fossil producer. And then I started to see, how can I actually change things? What's my place? Where should I go in activism? And I went into a climate movement that is really great. But what I also saw was that like 95% of the resources went either to lawsuits, lobbying, or writing reports. And I believe lobbying is important, but the Equinor and the oil sector is much better at lobbying. Lawsuits is fine, but the system is rigged, and we have I've done my master thesis on this, how economized they're thinking within every ecological aspect. And then more knowledge is not really what we're dealing with here. The problem is power and power structures. And that's when I more and more saw that we don't have the financial power, but what we really need is to build people power. And that's kind of where I found resonance, I guess, with Extinction Rebellion, and actually being on the street and trying to build those grassroots movements and spaces. And over the last 5-6 years, I've, together with other people here, organized around 50 civil disobedience action. I started together with someone else, XR Youth. We have had, thousands of news articles. I've had hundreds of interviews. I won in the Supreme Court, and all these things. But I think what really stands out is the relations and the activist spaces for each other. One of the most interesting things is after ONS is the big oil conference here in Norway, in Stavanger, every second year. And after ONS last year, we started something called the Nordic Climate Justice Coalition, where we try to gather the whole Nordic youth climate movement, Greta and the others. And that laid the groundwork for what we had this August, when XR had the biggest civil disobedience action ever against Norwegian oil. We were hundreds. We were first in 10 different actions in Arendal, and then we blocked Mongstad, the biggest oil refinery in Europe, for 2 days in a row. Aurora came and had a concert for us. Greta came. We had coverage from over 60 countries. It's much easier to get coverage about Norwegian climate policies abroad than it is in Norway. Just to clarify, because we don't like to see ourselves. And we also came back to Oslo and were in the streets in the hundreds. And that really made a difference. I'm speaking to the leaders in MDG, and they are clear that before your actions, we were polling far under 4%. And you're the only reason climate got up on the agenda in this election. And they're saying it straight out, we probably wouldn't get over 4% if you didn't do what you did. And if MDG went under 4%, Sylvi Listhaug would have been the prime minister in Norway now. So that says that activism can work. But it also says something about that the people power that's building now is like, I haven't got 1 kroner for what I've done the last 5 years. And it's based on people volunteering, working extra jobs. And that's really tiring, and I feel we are in a space where we're struggling. We're not able to resonate with people. We're not even close to build the movement we need. So that also brings us to a space, also in terms of the far right and these things, So we're really like, what's the way forward? I'm not sure. I think there's a sentiment that they might go in a direction where we try to build, like, I'm not sure if XR is going to get 10,000 people in the streets tomorrow or in the next half year. So maybe we'll have to try something new that connects better the different social justice issues together, whether it's Palestine or feminism or you name it, racism and all these things. And that's something we're looking into. How can we build those alliances to actually build the movement, the people movements that we need in order to get structural change? Because this is not just, you know, something that would be nice to have. It's existential.
Thank you. Luca, can you tell us about what you have been doing recently? You have done extensive work on trans people's rights, especially in the healthcare system. And you also received the Kim Friele Memorial Prize last June, together with Christina Maria Teigland. Congratulations. The prize is awarded annually to those who have shown great effort and commitment to queer and human rights. What have you been doing recently?
Yeah, that's... I actually do a lot of running, and I think it is important to do what you tried to do with us earlier. Also, just to be a little bit grounded. And always when I run, I think about the fact that when the fascists are coming, and they are coming, I'm actually going to be able to run from them, and that kind of feels existential for me now. It's a part of. Those of us who can, like I actually think that we have to mobilize in every way possible, and some of us have bodies that can run, and that is something you should do. That was a discretion out of whatever. So my name is Luca. I am currently working in the Norwegian Patient Organization for Transgender People, or Gender Incongruence, because that's what the diagnosis is called. I do oppose the whole medical system, and it is kind of a strategic way of getting access to healthcare, even though I hate the whole fact that the healthcare system is a place where our bodies is being discussed, talked about, dissected, researched upon, and in every way being like managed by the state and other people. So I started activism and trans activism like 15 years ago. And everything has since then become a lot more urgent. Like the climate crisis was urgent 15 years ago too, but it's more urgent now. The rise of the far right and fascism is terrifying, and sometimes like working just with this like tiny minority group feels somehow useless. But I'm also looking at a world where this tiny minority that I belong to is being like targeted by everyone and being presented as like the main problem on the side of like Muslims and trans people. We're like Trump has an obsession and Putin has an obsession, and I think this all is like trying to divert us all from what really matters and the things we should be working on. But yeah, so I started off with just nobody knowing anything about trans people. That was kind of the feeling when I started doing activism 15 years ago. There was like one happy and a sad trans story in the media, and then we started doing activism and saying like we don't have rights, and we didn't. Like when I started activism, we didn't even have like a law against discrimination on the basis of gender identity. We had a system where trans people were forced to go through sterilization to change legal gender, and all of these things have changed, but they all changed before 2016, and after that the backlash has felt like a bulldozer hitting us. And now I feel we're working in I don't even know what to do anymore, because it's terrifying, and the backlash is tremendous. And I did my master back in the days, writing about, as you said, how the public discourse and the media is talking about trans people and how that actually affects our lives, and the options and possibilities for understanding ourselves and organizing. And we kind of went from a place where no one talked about us to a place where there was like these happy stories of some trans people coming out. And then we started seeing more political stories, people actually demanding things in the Norwegian media around like 2010. And until 2016, there was a lot of like political stance and claims being made. But after that, you see a clearly decline in the number of trans people talking about trans issues in Norwegian media. Now we're being discussed like all the time, and nobody talks to us, and the things we are saying, we're not being listened to, we're being silenced. And I also think that a lot of trans people, myself included, is experiencing this whole environment to be like very traumatic, and we do not want to raise our voices anymore, and the cost of doing activism is enormous, and there are also very few of us, like, to begin with. We're like less than 1% of the population. So what have I been doing? I try to do everything at once, since we're like not so many people. So that's like political activism, writing a book, trying to get onto the media, trying to take care of myself and my community, and also building a stronger community, and all of this at once. I find it strange that no matter how much information we gather about the violation the state is doing towards us, nobody seems to believe us. Like PKI just published a report stating that half of the people who go to the National Healthcare Service for trans people experience conversion therapy, which is illegal in Norway, which is like systematic efforts done by health professionals to try to make us conceal or change our gender identity. It's like, and nobody cares. But I did want to say, that's a leap, but today is the 20th of November, which is the Transminnedagen. How do you say that in English? The Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is an international day where trans people think about and commemorate. Is that the word? Yeah. Trans people who's been killed because they're trans. And the day was made in Rita Hester's name. She was a African-American trans woman, which so many of the trans people who are being killed are black and brown women or trans feminine people. And this year's number is 281. And that's a lot, because that's just the trans people who's being counted as being killed. And also we're like a tiny minority. And that's been like that for ages. But what we're seeing, and which is terrifying to me, or should be terrifying to everyone, is that it is an extreme increase in the number of trans activists that are being killed. So what I think we're seeing is like the more like random hatred that affected some trans people, and especially, of course, trans people who also are part of other marginalized groups, are now clearly being more like politicized, and we are being targeted as a political group or as a political movement. And that is, it's not really a shift in politics, because like they hate us all the same, but it is frightening to see that they're going after us because we have been able to actually organize and build a movement and made change. And that backlash is it's tremendous these days. And what we're also seeing, like today we're talking about the far right and how it is terrifying, and fascism is terrifying, and transphobia and racism and not caring about the environment has been traditionally a far right thing all the time. It's like inherent to the fascist, whatever. What is terrifying about being a trans person is that some of the hatred towards us are also coming from the left. And there's like a lot of groups, and that is like part of this anti-gender movement is that a lot of people who call themselves feminists and who do politically belong to the left are also very against trans people these days. And that is a thing I don't really know how to tackle. It's even more terrifying to see, because like the normal places where you would seek allianceship and would be like, oh, we can work together, we're the good guys, so to say, are not functioning for trans people now, and that is that is also terrifying. And for all of us to just live in a world where truth is not truth anymore and everything is just falling apart, it's so that is why I run. So that is the sum up of it. But I do think, to follow up on some of the things that you have all said, I think it is very important that we do what the fascists are trying to, like, they are targeting us all because of our beliefs and who we are, and we should face them together. And even though like all of our struggles are important, we need, as you said, to build like a folkefront of all of us who do not want to live in a fascist world. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Christina, can you tell us about the challenges of researching topics like racism in the Norwegian context? We have worked together, and I'm aware that there are a lot of challenges in terms of emotional labor. Can you tell us about this? Thank you.
Yes. So the challenge of working on racism in Norway, it's mainly about the blindness of the majority to racism. So it's like wanting to prove something that nobody sees. So it's like you wanted to say that ghosts exist and nobody sees them. The problem is that it's not us having hallucinations, it's the majority that is blind to what exists. And so the challenge is related to the fact that the mechanisms of discrimination that we uncover actually affects us as researchers as well. And so there is this whole apparatus that is designed basically to silence the minority. And although I'm white and privileged, I'm an academic, I'm still an immigrant as well in Norway. And so we are coming from a disadvantaged position researching racism. So, and all of this causes emotional labor. This is the extra effort that we need to make in order to collect the data, process the data. For example, we were reading hundreds and hundreds of articles where effectively people with an immigrant background are stigmatized. And so we are reading about ourselves as well. So you keep on reading yourself being stigmatized. And then you have to deal with the reactions by other people. So whenever we have made presentations about our results, there are always people questioning our results. And let's be clear, if you're an academic, you're used to being questioned. That's part of the academic process. The problem is that when you are being dismissed, so we actually suffer epistemological violence. So this is violence related to, when you are not regarded as a legitimate source of knowledge or producer of knowledge for other reasons than the way you have gathered this knowledge. So for the reason of our identity, because we are non-Norwegian, we are immigrants ourselves, and somehow we are not regarded as credible interlocutors. So we have been, we have faced denials of racism. We have faced mitigations of racism when people said, "Oh, but you haven't investigated whether it was intentional or not." Well, it doesn't matter whether there was an intent or not. So racism is there in the coverage. We have the evidence. So in fact, we were always treated as we had an opinion, but actually we were presenting our evidence. So we were also dismissed in terms of attacking our credentials as academics even. So we were asked by people, "Are you students? How long have you been doing this? Have you done this before?" So really, things that we have never faced before. So all of this creates a lot of emotional labor because you already expect these continuous challenges and this dismissal. And yes, and this is exhausting. And so it doesn't stop when you leave the office. We were initially funded for a few months. So our study was supposed to last 2 years. And so 4 years afterwards, we're still writing the articles because there were times we just needed to take a break. Yeah, I think we've been on sick leave, both of us. Not only because of this project, but it's been really quite a burden to carry. Yeah.
Yes, and also listening to the stories of immigrants and their lives, and how overwhelming it is to listen to all the experiences of discrimination, racism, and inequality. Yeah, thank you. But as a media scholar, how do you think the media contribute to the mainstreaming of racism in the Norwegian context? What have been the recent trends that you have observed?
Yes, we have been asking ourselves the question, how is it possible that racism exists in Norway when there are, in fact, laws that are supposed to prevent from racism happening? And also, people, they don't want to be racist. None of them would regard themselves as racist. So how is it possible that racism is still there? And so our answer, it's been that, okay, you can read the article about this. So we use a concept by Michel Foucault. He talks about dispositive. So a dispositive is really like a machine. So you can imagine racism in Norway as a machine that has different components. So there is a linguistic component, so there is a rhetoric, like, for example, what we see in the media. It's not, it doesn't include the racist slurs, but in between the lines, there are all these assumptions about the superiority of Norwegian culture and inferiority of the culture of those with an immigrant background. There are also practical aspects to it, so behaviors, because one has internalized all these messages and acts accordingly. And there are also materializations of this discourse. So it's not just about the language, but the very reality becomes organized around this discourse. And so all these components, when you put them together, create something quite solid. Something quite solid that yet is invisible because we all have internalized it. And what we have found is that not only racism is perpetrated by, let's say, mostly by the majority, and many of them are not even aware of doing that, but also those at the receiving end of racism participate in this because they have also internalized the scripts. And in fact, among our interviewees, I mean, people were talking about the fact that you have a low self-esteem because you're always portrayed as being somehow inferior. You are self-conscious all the time. You feel you are under surveillance. You feel you're being judged all the time. So it's like you are always paying attention to what you're doing because somebody might be watching you. And it's easier to be at fault because you are different. So effectively, you're never free. Yeah, so these are the mechanisms that make racism invisible and yet ubiquitous and really ingrained in the very fabric of society. Thank you.
And in this situation, how do you think one can communicate the results of a research that leads to discomfort, resistance, and denial? In what ways we can think of communicating a topic that is uncomfortable?
Yes, this is also something we have reflected a lot about because in academia there is a lot is being said about dissemination, about reaching out to society. We don't want to be in the ivory tower. We need to communicate. And so we wanted to engage with society since the very beginning of our project. In fact, we organized 2 workshops for journalists because at the beginning we wanted to write this toolkit for a more inclusive coverage of people with an immigrant background. So we wanted to invite the journalists to develop the toolkit together with them. So we wanted really to involve them. But when we sent the invitations to basically all the journalistic organizations, all newspapers, everyone in Norway, basically a handful, literally, of minority journalists turned up. So basically, nobody even replied to our email. And so this, again, it's about being ignored, being invisible, the epistemological violence. But so we realized, that there was no point in trying to engage them. And it was better actually to preach to the converted. So when we started organizing events where we mentioned, where we tried to reach out to the broader public mentioning racism and what we were finding, then other racism researchers, or people who were sympathetic to the cause and interested, they started to turn up. And one might think, but you're preaching to the converted, what's the point? But we've realized it actually strengthens everyone in becoming aware of how racism works, so that everyone can see it. And also in Norway, it's especially if you're an immigrant, it's not acceptable to complain, because you should just be grateful that you are in Norway. Everything is perfect, right? And so it actually helps them to acknowledge that actually things are not as great, perhaps. So preach to the converted. But also we realized that it was very easy to get dismissed, especially at the beginning when we didn't have anything published. And so the second recommendation I would say is publish first and go public later, so that once they question you, then you can say, hey, read the paper. Because otherwise you will always be dismissed as, this is your opinion, or you're so sensitive, you're complaining too much.
Or you are contributing to racism yourself.
Yes. And then the third recommendation is communicate differently, because what we have observed is actually people becoming triggered by this. So you can't have a discussion really, because many people in Norway, it's both a good thing and a bad thing. They have a very strong sense of community, but sometimes this becomes an identification with the nation. And the nation revolves around these ideals of equality, peacefulness, and all that, which is wonderful. But when you challenge these values and you say, actually, it's not as equal, then this for the nervous system feels like an attack against your identity. And so people do become triggered. So it's really difficult to reach out to them, because they're not listening. They're just fighting for their life and rejecting what we're saying. So we have worked with a storyteller, Meda Zolfakari, who helped us develop a performance. So we created a 25 minutes performance. The video is also online if you're interested. And so we tried to put through theater across the message, and to also to convey the experiences of our interviewees, because at the end we're all humans, and perhaps we can communicate through emotions and through sharing stories rather than an academic article. So I would leave it there.
Thank you. Jonas, in what ways fighting for the planet or future survival is changing or different nowadays in the current political climate?
Oh, that's a big one. I think it's very important, first of all, to acknowledge that there are different contexts. So how it is in the US can be very different from the Netherlands to Norway. And I think for us climate activists, it's really tricky to figure out how to stand against like far right, and how to kind of encounter that, because they want to use us, you know. So, for example, if we do something, I was like Stop Oljelettinga, for example, which is not Extinction Rebellion, so there's another group, when they put paint on paintings and like those types of things. When you do those shock effects, that doesn't destroy anything, but they evoke a lot of feelings. You know that the far right will use that for whatever it's worth. So I think like, how do you, when we think tactics and strategy, what type of polarization along what axis do we need? And what's the backlash that's coming from the far right if we do something? And a feeling for me, at least, has been that I think 4 or 5 years ago for the climate movement here in Norway, media attention was maybe more important, where we like played maybe more into the attention economy, where like we just need to get stuff out there, and then if we get counter voices, then that's fine. I think XR the last 3 years has been quite consistent that we're targeting the fossil fuel industry and their narratives where they are at the conferences, so it's a more direct thing. And I'm not saying that we should only target the responsible and not the public. But that is also like a part of that has also been that we won't give the far right too much to play with. And that was also something we thought about before the election when Sylvie was on the front. Like if we did something very controversial, they would love that and use it and to get their kind of narrative in. So I think that's something that we more and more have to talk about. But I think the solution, what we're seeing is that the way forward is not only media, but the way to change is more building roots between us and building alliances and building communities, because that's going to last. And that's what we need to build, resistance and be resilient in what's to come. And that's also make those community based on the opposite values. That's the far right, to show that there are real alternatives to the status quo.
We see a global trend in criminalizing activism in different countries. What are the experiences in Norway? Have you experienced or have you seen that this is also a trend in the Norwegian context?
I would just like to paint the picture a bit how it is globally. So, as you mentioned as well, activists are being killed. It's about several hundred climate activists are killed each year, mostly indigenous people, often in South America, but also across the world. And we know that different type of layers of discrimination, whether it's age, gender, ethnicity, religion, is an important factor for people at risk. But this is also the case in Western Europe. If recently an activist for holding a Zoom call talking about a peaceful action, just holding a Zoom call talking about peaceful action, civil disobedience that was disruptive, led to 5 years in prison. That's in the UK. That's way longer than most serious crimes. I was in Litteraturhuset in Germany to stop a coal mine a couple of years back. There were 2,000 police officers there ready to just beat you. They just came at you and beat you if they saw you, if they could. They didn't care. And like 70, 80 activists went to hospital. And, if you and me went to Denmark and joined the action I was in earlier this spring, we just sat down in the lobby for Maersk, which was sending weapons to Gaza, and is one of the most pollutive companies in the world. We sat down in their lobby and didn't want to leave. And when the Danish police came, they said, "We are not accepting to carry you because we might hurt our backs. You have to stand up." And we say, "No, we're not moving." They took pain grip on your neck and started to choke you. And they just did this openly. And people couldn't breathe until you stood up yourself. That's the time of trauma you get just in Denmark. So the police brutality is rapidly rising in Northern Europe as well the last 3 years. In Norway, I would say it's much better. It's often much better than compared to Denmark and Sweden. There have been instances that is completely unacceptable, where they also have lost in court. For example, especially related to naked, they're stripping our naked for no reason and then traumatize us. But that's like not very common. But I would say what's the criminalization here in Norway is fines. So in Norway, we don't have a brutal police force. Sometimes we do, and I've been with Palestinian activists as well, where they have crossed the line. But it's not to the level of other countries, I would say. But in general, they're good. But if you get a fine in Sweden or Denmark, for peaceful civil disobedience, it costs you 2,000 kroners. In Norway, it's 20,000 kroners. It's 10 times more. So the strategy the Norwegian state has to silence our critical voices, especially if you want to use civil disobedience, is to make it so expensive for us that we cannot mobilize and scaring people to protest. So that's their strategy, and it's kind of working.
And you are also writing your book about the structural changes needed for fighting for ecological crisis and the strategies for building people power. Do you have anything to share with us about what are the actual strategies for building people power in today's political climate?
Wow, that's a big one. I think, first of all, it's important to understand how social movements work. So I've, for example, been speaking a lot with Greta and other about what happened in 2019 with the Fridays for Future. And when we speak strategy, there are many lessons, but to me, maybe the most important lesson is that something very concrete happened in 2019. And that happened in classrooms. And that was that the cool people in the classrooms went from saying, like, oh, are you going to a climate demo? To saying, what? You're not joining the climate demo? It went from being lame to being socially accepted. And so you have the social tipping point where suddenly you feel there's a momentum. There's this trigger event, and then it became social acceptable to do something. And then you saw it with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and other in the civil rights movement and all these things. Suddenly over a day, like we can feel like we're nowhere close to being where we need to be. And then in 2 days, there are millions out on the street, just like that. So that's important to understand that social movements go in waves. But also a key takeaway was that the climate movement, at least not in Norway, was not ready for a tipping point. We didn't manage to draw all those young students and actually give them enough workshops and like giving them a strategy for where to go forward. So what I am working a lot with is, first of all, how do we, make a social tipping point happen? That's one thing. We have to trying to figure that out as activists. But as important, we need to build the communities and competence and the strategy before the social tipping point comes. So when it comes, we're ready to exploit it and actually build the mass power we need. So I'm very interested in like building the structures needed for the tipping point and then actually kind of trigger the effect. And I'm not going to go... There are different strategies to think about how to do that. But I think as one key thing is that you need people that actually are willing to be disruptive. So just standing on a town or like in front of the parliament one day in a month is not going to change anything, because the next day the politician can say, thank you so much, but now we can move forward. You actually have to be disruptive over time. So and that's what you saw with the civil rights movements as well. So I think that's like some key things. But yeah, it's a big issue.
Yeah, we will wait for your book. Thank you, Luca. In what ways has transphobia been normalized in the Norwegian context? I know you have also been working in discourse around trans people. What are the trends of normalization of transphobia in the Norwegian context?
Yeah. I have to start off with saying that transphobia has always been very normal in the Norwegian context. We've never seen a time where being transphobic was not okay, or that saying transphobic thing actually wasn't beneficial. Most people who are transphobic, they benefit from being transphobic. But we see a difference in how the transphobia looks these days, and it's part of this greater disruption of truth and knowledge and things. So the discourse now, the anti-trans movement, are using a lot of more like medical language. They're using a lot of pseudoscience kind of discourse, and they're trying to build this web of seemingly truthful things and people and organizations, and this is true for the whole anti-gender movement. And I think that and we also see, and this is true also for all our movements, you see a shift from talking about like how you don't like brown people to saying you don't like the way brown people do their activism. And it's the same like with trans people. It's not like trans people you have an issue with, you have an issue with trans activists and the claims we make and the political stance we make, and that is also a way of saying you hate us without saying you hate us. And I think that is a thing we see being more used strategically. And of course, the whole basis of the anti-trans movement in Norway now is to say, we're not saying that trans people don't exist per se, or we're not saying you shouldn't be allowed to live per se. We're just saying there are only two genders. And no one asked these people, what the fuck does that mean? What is that claim in political and legal systems? Because they're not just stating there are only two genders to say so, as they are, of course, allowed to say. It's freedom of speech, blah, blah. But what are the consequences? And I think that is blurring kind of the transphobia. They're not, Some of them are being more blurred, and some of them are being like very blunt and also very transphobic. And I was actually surprised by the case you mentioned with the Høyre-politiker Sandelin, when he said that trans people commit a lot of violence more than other groups in society and so on. And he actually got evicted from that party, and I was actually surprised, because I was like, this is the way transphobic people talk. This is the way the media covers trans people, and to me, I did recognize it as being very transphobic, but I was a little bit surprised that the public actually did, and I was like, oh, so there is a line. I'm somehow pleasantly surprised that there is actually a line for what you can say about trans people, because in my opinion, it feels like that line is, not there. But
Thank you. And how do you think we can protect ourselves physically and psychologically? I mean, our communities, not individually, of course. In addition to running.
In addition to running, which I've already asked you all to do, which is very helpful. I think that we need to build communities and a bigger movement with other people, especially being like one of the smallest minorities that exist in the world. We're totally reliant upon people being allies, and I do think that being an ally of trans people are harder these days, because it's like it's part of the anti-gender movement is also to bombard you with fake news and so the pseudoscience things and very technical arguments. So I think a lot of people find it hard to be a trans ally, because you have to face all these claims being made about trans people. But of course, we all need to just remind ourselves that this is about basic human rights. It's not whatever highly academic discussion about what gender is. This is about people's actual lives and whether or not I should be free to decide to say the sentence "I am a man" and not being punished for it, and also having being able to change my body if I want to. But how do you build communities? I don't. I do see that my community struggles a lot. Like, people are less and less part of the community itself, less and less being part of the public discourse. People are not being invited to the debates. They don't want to attend the debates and so on. But of course, we try to focus on the parts of being trans that are really joyful and fun. And that is not because you're going to make great activists out of having fun, but it is important that the fascists are trying to take something away from us, and what they're trying to take away is our freedom. They're trying to take away our fun, our sex, our freedom, our communities, and we should cling on to that. And that is also that is the freedom we're fighting for, to have this, to do these things. So we should remember not to stop doing those things. We should continue. And then I'm just hoping that the new generation of trans people will find a way to get off their smartphones and into the real world and build more of a community. But it is really hard. And there's trans people were already very marginalized when this whole backlash started. So we see a lot of trauma inside of the trans community. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe we spend 2 more minutes and then we will move to the questions and answers. So I know that you are active on different fronts. How do you think it's important to stand together and support each other's fight? If we can call it each other's fight, they can be our fight. Why do you think it's important?
Well, it's you can call it fascism or something else, but there's a division in the world that is actually real between the people who believe that the world should be a place where we all could live in freedom with respect for each other and the nature, and then there's the people who don't want that future, who just want to disrupt everything and do not believe that every human is equal. And I think we are the most people, the majority is us, the people who actually believe that other people are worthy of having a free life. And if we could just gather all those forces together and see how these things are connected, because they are definitely connected in the fascist worldview. They draw the lines between being gay and hugging trees, so to say, and so we need to do the same. And I think we're capable of doing that. It's not hard to and I think you see it clearly when people are making the structures where they just need your body to attend. And I do, that's the activism I do. That is not trans activism. Then I don't organize anything. I look, where do you want me to be and what do you want me to do? And then it's okay, I will go to this corner and be disruptive. I'll sit down and just sit here. I'll do these things. And it's fairly easy. And we just need a lot of people to start doing that, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, can we get the wireless microphone for... So, does anyone have a question? Just raise your hands. Yeah, thanks.
So, something I didn't hear a lot about, and I feel that is lacking often when we talk about current research and current activism, is the historical context. We've had enormous amounts of street violence, like the murder of Benjamin Hermansen. We've had police using horses against protesters. We've had massive illegal surveillance of activists. And we've had FIP in government in the past, Like, we've had right-wing extremists in our government before it was a reality in the rest of Europe, before Trump got in power. I think we have a lot of lessons to remember. Not just to learn, but to remember. And how do you think that we can use lessons from the past in thinking about activisms in the future and research in the future?
Just think. That's a very big and good question. So I think we're all chewing on that for a few seconds.
But it is attaching to the things you said about like how we're not immune. That's like the main point here is that that's kind of the basic thought there is none of us are inherently good human beings in a way. Like we're not immune to becoming fascists. So and we need to remember that, and we need to constantly look both at the past but also at the things that are currently happening. And I think it is very frightening to see the Norwegian media not only just like giving up like Charlie Kirk commemoral and blah blah on TV, but also how they say a lot of the things that FRP say without giving any historical context or saying how this is in breach of normal democracy rules. Like the Norwegian newspaper never say that, and I think they are they don't want to like seem political or biased in a way that makes a lot of this like we have to be the one who do all the the deeper understanding of what is actually being said and what the consequences of that are. And I don't think that people are being properly taught in school how like the ground rules of democracy actually functions to be able to understand that. And it's you see it a lot when people are like, oh yeah, we should just throw 14-year-old people into jail. And people are like, yes, that's a good idea. We should do more of that. And it's remarkable how people are not talking about what it means for a government to actually like put out we should put 14-year-old children into prison more because that's gonna help some kind of societal issue. I don't know what the takeaway was, but yeah.
I also have it's a great question. Like I think we learn from in an international history when it comes to the suffragettes, civil rights movement, apartheid. Like there's a close connection to that, and I think there's maybe an under prioritization of our own history here in Norway, in one sense. But I think there's one important thing, and that's when it comes to climate, I think in Norway, climate activists are kind of looked upon as not too bad guys. Like it can be some children saying we want a beautiful future and these things. And in Norway, our own story of ourselves is that we are peaceful, we are green and all these things. So the state doesn't want confrontation often with climate activists. So I think there's this let's just find them really much, but don't have any like very strong confrontation with them. But I think if you can if it's like a stronger othering, if it's immigrants or Blitz or like these types of environments, I think it's easier for the state to see they are the bad guys, so we can be stronger and have a stronger confrontational line against them, and that's fine by the public, because that's the confrontation we can better live with. So that's also the layers of discrimination that comes in. That I think also there's a difference here between who is what type of issue we're speaking about.
Are there any positive signs here? Because when I see, I follow a lot, I follow what's going on in the United States now. It's scary, I know, but I also see a lot of movements growing. You have frogs and unicorns dancing in the streets, facing ice. You have the podcast with Luca. It's a very good podcast. Not always, of course, has a trans perspective, but also a lot of other issues there in a positive way. Are there other good things happening? Because I think, like you said, most of us will not have a fascist country. We don't want to live in that world. Are there something good here?
Yes, there is a lot of good things going on, and I thank you for bringing that to attention, because it's been a dark panel, and with a lot.
Sorry
of
about that.
Yeah, no, yeah, but we do see growing organizing of different movements. We see more movements coming together and being like, okay, we are actually. What unites us is that we're anti-fascist, and I would encourage you to read Jonas Ball's last book, Together We Fight Fascism, which is just like a positive, how do we actually fight this? And of course the media is not covering, as they should, all the anti-fascist things that are going on in the United States and all over the world, but we are people, we're a lot of people, even, so I do encourage people to still believe in the force of people and to try to get more of that into your news feed also, and just go looking for that, because it is sometimes very depressing to think about all the things that are going in the wrong direction.
I also want to add something which is really interesting, I think. So last week I was in a seminar with one of the leading political experts on the far right in the US, and they had been researching how are the far right organizing themselves, and they've been going to Turning Point and Trump conferences and stuff and see, and then they spoke with the strategists behind these conferences, and what they said was when they started to listen to the speakers, they never spoke about policy. They only spoke about everyday issues that people could connect with, and then there was this othering, there was someone to blame. And the strategy behind these conferences said that how the winning cause is not to speak about policy, but is that people make friends. So these conferences was just like huge places where people could connect with each other and find a community. So the goal was to create community, and then they looked, and then like Turning Point, for example, which is Charlie Kirk, founder, they are in the US. They are on 3,500 different schools. They are going in every community in thousands of schools and churches each month. That's the level. That's how well they are organized, and they have the narrative and the strategy, and they are together. And the Micaiah English, which was the researcher, she said that the people coming was often from multicultural backgrounds, and they were not just white people. And they said that very many people of coming in asked very critical questions because they didn't agree with Trump's policy, but there was a space where they could give their frustration out, and they could be seen, and they were still accepted. So it was not this purity politics. But they were like, yeah, we see you, and we. So she actually felt that as a black woman, she was almost more welcomed at a Turning Point conference than what she was feeling in many progressive spaces. So the counter story then is that we have to be as organized. We cannot complain and just say that they are the problem, and say we actually have to get as well organized as them and build as good narrative that speaks to people's feelings. And if we get that grassroots, I think we can turn things around. And we're seeing that with Mandami. We're seeing it with Zach Polanski in the UK, that using many of the same mechanisms, and in Seattle and these things.
To understand what's going on there, I recommend Flipping Tables with Monty Mader. This is Trump is just the tip of the iceberg, 50 years, 60 years history behind it, because they have worked so long since the last World War for this, what's going on there now. So it's been years of working, like you just said. So I recommend that podcast. I now know more about what's going on there because of that.
Thank you. Yes.
Is it okay? Yeah. I came a little late. If I missed something, then I apologize. Feel free not to answer it. But I have kind of 2 questions, and I'll try to be like brief about them. So one of them is I really appreciated you saying that, you know, even here in Oslo, like there's certain populations that aren't really like in academia in meaningful ways. I'm from Østkanten, and so is my family for many generations. And even when you talk about things like police violence and stuff like that, just from being from like working class Oslo for many generations, my family has pretty horrendous stories of really horrific police violence that is constant. And even who was fairly young, I grew up with, I had the police in my schoolyard at least once a week. And I grew up with police raids with dogs at our schools to check for drugs. And so there's a lot of really severe policing of certain populations still, just at Østkanten here in Norway. But one thing, because I'm a queer activist, and when I came into queer activist spaces here in Oslo, I was really shocked because oftentimes it was usually just me that was actually like from Østkanten in Oslo. And I find that in a lot of actually activist spaces that I'm in, that like that's a population that's lacking even here, which is strange, right? Because we are the majority in Oslo. The majority of people who live in Oslo actually are working class-ish people from Østkanten in Oslo, but they're not really in that kind of activism. Even people in families like mine who were really involved in like working rights movements. So I guess I have a question with that about, you know, how can we involve that population? You know, if you have any thoughts about that, I guess, because I think a lot of working class people in Oslo, in the cities, actually do have quite a lot of experience in their families with a lot of really severe organizing, particularly with regards to working rights, which is really valuable and could be really useful if we could get people to organize. But in most like activist spaces, you don't find a lot of people actually from Østkanten at all. And then the second thing I was wondering is about taking care of allies, because one thing that I have noticed as like a trans activist is that as things are really vamping up, one of the major things that I'm noticing is that like partners of activists and allies who are not a part of the marginalized groups that they're fighting for are now getting attacked really severely as well. And before in queer activist spaces, you used to actually have the A represent ally in like LGBT IA. And part of that was because allies of queer people back in the day also faced really severe harassment, discrimination, violence just for being associated with that. And for me, I'm seeing that kind of trend happening again. So I guess I'm wondering if you have some thoughts about taking care of allies who are not necessarily a part of the groups they're fighting for as well. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Luca can answer shortly, or maybe you, Jonas, and anyone.
Yeah, I can also talk with Alexander about this later. But yeah, I think no. But I think I'm not going to answer so much to the Østkanten thing, because I think that's a problem that could solve itself. We just need to organize better on all different levels. And I think this is maybe like a thing that is good when the academia actually is part of and a talk to the activist community and trying to build those bridges between academia and everyday life and the everyday struggles that people face and are part of. When it comes to the allies, it's I think it's true. Like to say out loud now that you support trans people, you can get a fairly horrendous amount of backlash. And part of me want to be like, yeah, okay, so then you organize and take care of each other. We can't also do that. Take care of our allies. But the first thing is, I think a lot of people need to actually give themselves the permission to do that, because I think a lot of people, when we're just allied to a cause, we're kind of like, okay, so I'm doing this anti-racist work, but I'm not affected by racism, so then I'm not allowed to like take up space in that space, and I shouldn't. But you are allowed to feel they're being targeted by the people, the racists. They are violent. They're also violent towards white people, and maybe just because I think a lot of the good people, we're afraid to take up that space. So I think allies we should tell them, I guess, that they are allowed to feel distressed by the amount of transphobia in this world, and white people are allowed to feel distressed by the amounts of racism in the world. It's a inherently bad and terrible system. So maybe that's a start to give that kind of permission, I guess.
Thank you.
I can try to answer the Østkanten. I grew up in Grønland. I've lived there my whole life. And Grønland is now quite rich, but it was the poorest district in Norway when I was young. And I was the only ethnic Norwegian in my class. I have been thinking a lot about this question myself, and I think there is an underrepresentation in activist circle from Oslo East. I think there are several reasons. One is, as we've spoken about, that immigrants are kind of looked down upon. So if you also go out and complain and want something when we give you all these things, you're kind of feeling that's ungrateful and like the racism that you will experience. But I also think it's a lot about we just have to, I think climate spaces have to, and other spaces have to better understand them. I feel we have so little capacity that we just post on like social media, come, and we kind of reach out to everyone, and we're not specializing our message to certain fractions because we don't have that capacity. But I think if like academia could say, these fractions are focused on this, they need this and this and this, and then we speak about this and connecting the issues, I think there's a problem. But I think it's about speaking to people. And I think the threshold for just coming to an activist space is very high if you just see an ad or on social media or something reading. So I think it's all about face-to-face and lowering the threshold. And that comes up, like it's a lot about transparency, I think, when it comes to it. But I definitely think there's a thing there, especially like, Pakistan, 1/3 was underwater. I have so many Pakistani friends. Like there is something there. Like Somalia, I have so many Somali friends, and they're massive potential hunger in the future. So there's definitely potential there, and we have to crack that puzzle.
Thank you. We have unfortunately run out of time, but you are welcome to just come forward and ask your questions or just discuss. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you.